Welcome to the American Intelligence Media. I'm your host, Douglas Gabriel. I'm here with Michael McKibben. Welcome to the show, Michael.
Hi, Douglas. Great to talk to you.
Well, I'm excited because something that we predicted and that I believe you backed us up on is that, or at least the possibility, I can't put words in your mouth, but I said it clearly, the FANG is going down, and throw in all of the social media, because they're all based upon stolen IP from Leader Technology to begin with. Secondly, they have, so many billion-dollar lawsuits for security violations for you name it. Now in America, they're actually saying, as you notice, the president invited each one of them at a time, come on into the White House, and they had a little chat, didn't they? And the word monopoly came out, the word RICO came out, the word antitrust came out, and yet they still moved forward. And these totally corrupt, insider-created, stolen technology, fake Silicon Valley, cardboard cutout, idiot cyber warlords are fake. And I have said that they are going to go down. And the reason they're going to go down is because they were caught in the 2016 election manipulating things. That hasn't come out yet fully, but it will. And that they're going to try the same for the next election. Why? They have no choice. If Trump has a second term, the globalists die, and these people are the scum of the globalists. These are the fake facades that they put out in front to say, oh, look at these wizard kings, these amazing digital warlords who just can, on a weekend over a keg of beer and with his friends at Harvard, write social media code. No, it didn't happen like that. And we're going to, we will
made a great movie, though.
It made a great movie, exactly. And so I've said FANG is going down for a long time, and I just want to point out that your recent research that shows the true origins, I mean, literally the documents, the people who we didn't ever, I'm a historian, I'm a British historian, as a matter of fact, and I studied, not that I'm British, I studied British history, as it were, as one of my degrees, and I didn't know these people. I didn't know these people existed, and you pointed out the very people that made the Five Eyes Agreement, and something that Betsy and I came to just the other day as we were talking, because you had said it, that the Five Eyes, which I'm going to interject, you didn't say this, the Five Eyes with all 54 of their nations and their commonwealth, really they'd like to include America as part of that, but the Five Eyes is, Britain, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, that's all British, and then America. Well, they never let loose of us. We're still underneath the, we haven't won the first American Revolution. Now, but what you pointed out was amazing. Because of Five Eyes, that explains why Serco, a British company, automatically gets to look at every American patent. Because it could be used by the Five Eyes to be weaponized. And if that's the case, then we have to share it with our very good, best intelligence buddies, the Five Eyes. And if I've said all along, it's really only one eye, it's Britain, and we need to poke it out like Odysseus poked out the eye of the Cyclops, because what they're doing is absolutely criminal. And I think FANG, because they sent over Nick Clegg and because of Rick Allen, to try to save Facebook, that just shows how desperate they are. And I think they're going down. So my question is Betsy's question to me, to you. Is FANG going down, and how does that play into this big picture of the research that you're doing?
Wow. Some big questions.
Well, Betsy's she's not a small thinker.
First of all, I have some personal opinions, but my interest for my shareholders and myself is to get the Miller Act notice paid. For us to be paid for the technology that all these guys are using without any remuneration to the creators. And that not only goes for our patents, but there's other patents and intellectual property that they've stolen to make this, to basically weaponize a whole body of technology to achieve what they've gotten today. So that's right out of the chute. I don't care whether they live or die as companies. I just want paid. And with that as a background, I do have some observations about what's going on right now, which may be a little bit different angle on the subjects that hasn't come to light yet. But I think that the public is getting played right now on this whole issue of the breakup and the trust busting of the monopolies. I think we're getting played, and I think we're getting played like we got played with the breakup of AT&T. And if you start looking at the longer view history that you talked about just now, with the absolute creation of the Five Eyes intelligence agreement between the U.S. and the Commonwealth, with Britain taking the lead, we see there the seeds of what we have now. And I don't think that we're going to get a good solution out of this discussion of monopoly and censorship until we realize what the real problem is. And I don't think right now the discussion is properly focused, frankly.
Well, focuses. What should we be focused on?
Well, I think that the basic premise that monopolies stifle competition is a good premise. But keep in mind, all the laws that were written to break up monopolies were all written by law firms for the monopolies. So as we have learned over time, the best people to interpret laws on any subject are the people who wrote them, which would be the attorneys, would be the large law firms. So do you think in the end that they are going to interpret the application of law in any other way than something that's beneficial for them? That's a question to you.
I would guess no. And the reason I would guess no is because of Standard Oil, after it was broken up for antitrust, became Seven Sisters, and each of the Seven Sisters was as big as Standard Oil in just a few years. So you can't really break it up. All you're going to do is just make more money for the same people.
So what's happened now, and just in the last couple of weeks, there's this hue and cry for breakup of the monopolies, and the average person on Main Street sees that as a good thing. But here's the problem: Main Street's getting worked because what happened with AT&T? That's what's going to happen again. They broke up AT&T into the baby bells. Then what that allowed was for all of the executives for AT&T, and at that time included Lucent, they all got to cash in all of their stock options in the breakup, and they collected a lot of money for themselves and their attorney firms and their brokers. Okay? So what happened next? They formed all these baby bell companies like Ameritech and Bell South and Quest and how many were there? I can't remember now. But anyway, so all of those companies formed, and those companies all sold stock. So with all this cash from the breakup, the cash was reinvested in all of these baby bells, and all of these baby bells then grew their businesses, issued new stock options to their insiders, and what happened eventually? Eventually, they all started merging back together, and in each merger, those executives got to cash out their options again, and so it's been one big feeding frenzy. So this whole issue of monopoly needs to be rethought, because what we're doing is we're rewarding the bad guys in the very process of breaking them up. That's the bottom line. They can't be rewarded. They have to be penalized, and they're not penalized. And the other thing that I think that's really critical here to think about when you're talking about breaking up a company is most people who start a business, they want to keep control of their company, and so in their view, the idea that these people are losing control of their companies sounds like a negative. But in fact, all these executives know that's just a part of the game. So for them, it's a positive, and so they're playing the Main Street public, knowing that they will be sympathetic and will think that breaking up is a bad thing when in fact it's a good thing for them, if that made sense.
Oh, yeah, that's the way it works. I mean, my only happiness is that what these companies might go down and that a Mark Zuckerberg or a Peter Thiel or a Elon Musk or Eric Schmidt or a Jeff Bezos or Jack Ma would actually just, their face would hit the dirt. Why? Because we know they're fake. We know that they were insider traders propped up, except for maybe Eric Schmidt, who is truly evil.
Okay, can I stop you there?
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned a number of names of people who've are enriched to the nth degree, and now you're talking about breaking them up. If the discussion in the breakup included all of these executives disgorging themselves from all the value that they have taken personally, then it would get interesting. And that's never been on the table in the past in the breakups of the trusts. But if you added that to the mix, then you're talking about real results.
See, I don't think it's antitrust or monopoly. I think it is RICO. I think that they've been racketeering. I think all along that it was crooked racketeering from basically the Chicago mob moved down to Little Rock, Arkansas through Hillary Clinton and the Rose Law Firm. And since then, no patent has been free of the incursion of the Five Eyes. In other words, Hillary Clinton trying to be like the Queen, and the Queen always getting her piece of the pie also. So it seems pretty evident to me that your point is quite well taken, and I think you've made a similar point to me once before, that if I would just like the joy of somebody making Mark Zuckerberg sit down and say, please write a single line of code, and seeing that he can't. And that this entire mythology that is created around these brilliant young geniuses who just out of the blue, can just amazingly, magically do things like a Jeff Bezos. When we know that Jeff Bezos is a replacement, we know who his trainer was. She's the one who wrote the Paris Climate Accord. We know that, that Jack Ma is nothing more than a puppet of the Chinese Communist Central Committee. We know that Elon Musk is a complete idiot, and that he and the group, Peter Thiel and the whole group, that all became these billionaires who somehow control our world, they're fake. They might,
Okay, so let's take that those personnel. Let's take that whole discussion one level deeper, because I think we're playing into the hands of the propagandists by continually focusing in on personalities. And you kind of alluded to this earlier. But here's the bottom line. As far as we can see, nothing in tech right now is not controlled by the rogue CIA. That is my view. And we see this from these documents going back to the formation of this U.S.-British Commonwealth technology sharing agreement and information sharing agreement that includes propaganda. And so what we're seeing now is we're seeing many personalities attached to one specific strategy in theft, and that is the rogue CIA basically took on technology, is controlling it globally, and is just branding it with different names that gets the Main Street public off of the subject of what's going on underneath. So the core, the belly of the beast, is one entity, and so that's the part of this that needs to be on the table, because I think until it is, we're not going to solve the problem properly.
Yes, that's and the old Saul Alinsky tactic of going after the individual. Well, what they do is they make the heads of these corporations, these cardboard cutouts, they make them some kind of American Idol. They make them a hero. They make them a superstar. And they tell everybody, oh, if you work hard enough, you can write some code and you can, create a social media system that makes you a billionaire. And then you can be like a Mark Zuckerberg and do nothing, never ever go to work, just wear a T-shirt and go around the world running with people and having a good time. Well, let's remember that they couldn't exist without their CIA contract, now could they? Little Marky, not only with the insider trading, and not only with the support that he had because it came directly out of the Highlands Forum and DARPA and In-Q-Tel research. This is all American money. This was militarized, and then he gets to benefit from it. And yes, breaking up his company could just make him more filthy rich. But if we simply
right, so all of that income needs to be disgorged because it's all, as you say, based on racketeering. So it's racketeering out of a single entity called the Rogue CIA that organized the Highlands Group and organized Five Eyes and organized IBM Eclipse Foundation and consolidated control of the telecommunications and the internet, and then created a bunch of personalities for that single entity to fool the public into thinking that there's competition out there. So they created Facebook and Google and YouTube, and they were all basically operating off of the same database foundation. And so in collecting that data and putting it in one place so that it can be completely mined on a global basis. And so the idea now that, we've finally gotten caught, the public, they were expecting this, by the way. There are some really interesting notes of some of the meetings that Zuckerberg had with his handlers back in 2003, where we actually see the evidence of it in some conversations he had with Aaron Greenspan. And in that, Zuckerberg let it out that he had discussions with people that they realized that privacy was would eventually raise its head, and they would have to address it then. But up until then, they were not going to deal with privacy and security at all. That's essentially what he said to Greenspan, and I think that was a Freudian slip. But that's essentially what they learned from the PayPal days, because it's all the PayPal mafia guys, the guys who cashed out in PayPal in about 2002, that were a part of this Highlands Group reforming into the social space. And so from then until now, we've seen the clamor for privacy and security and property rights is now reaching a fevered pitch. So they finally realize they're going to have to give up and break it up and then play the AT&T break up and remerge game. And so at each stage of this, at each phase of this, those brokers, those attorneys, those accountants, and those companies and those people with the stock options are going to make a killing, no matter what the name is on the corporation at the end. And I think that in this breakup, there needs to be a new dynamic. And if that dynamic is you take all that ill-gotten gain and you turn it back, and in our case, we want paid for what was stolen from us. We want paid. We want paid good market value for what was stolen from us. And with that, my shareholders and I, we can put that cash to good work and actually build a system that's based on the Bill of Rights, which the previous one is not.
Well, I'm hoping...
And that'll be new.
Yeah, I'm hoping that can happen, and that it can be completely coincident, completely coincided with the synchronization of the fall of these companies as they're having to pay out huge fees. They need to the government can hit them with a fee for racketeering, all of them that we've named, and we can go into how this is really a revolving door, because it starts with we the people's money, goes to the military, which becomes globalist, goes through private corporations, gets put in charge, gets it into a corporation where a figurehead runs it. They get in trouble. Okay, they go bankrupt. The figurehead gets whatever. Nobody goes to jail. Nobody ever, even after killing people, ever gets held responsible because it's a corporation. And then it just gets split up into some more companies that already were set up by the same insider traders who did the first round. And
right.
So we can see that, here's what I say. I say Facebook will collapse if they don't have the CIA contract, and if they do not have basically...
Can I stop you there?
Yes.
Can I stop you there? They have the CIA contract. They are the CIA. It's not like it's a separate
Exactly.
entity.
That's
They're not, I mean, it's not going to go away. That data is still going to be there.
that's where I was going
And
with
so
this.
what they're doing now is they're moving it all offshore, as you mentioned. I think you mentioned earlier about how the battle is now being set up between President Trump and China and Europe. And so what we've noticed for a long time, for years, Facebook and Google and Amazon have been building data centers outside the United States. And so they've been, I think that they have been planning for this event to occur, and at that point they would just flip the switch and the data would all be outside the United States, therefore outside the reach of the U.S. law. Not that our judges are enforcing it, but in the theory that they would enforce it, then they would be subject to U.S. law.
Well, that's absolutely certainly the case right now. And it's taking America all this time to catch up to bring our charges of security violations, the user agreement violations, the selling of personal material, the lying, and then the network system, which was always connected to the CIA. So when you say Facebook, you say CIA. It has always been a weaponized psyops experiment. And it's just more effective than anybody ever thought it could possibly be.
And it's a propaganda tool. It's a propaganda tool. It's an election manipulation tool. It's a number of things. I mean, we as we've talked about before, we have absolute 100% proof that Hillary Clinton paid Facebook to build an election rigging feature within Facebook in 2009. That started. So when you say 2016, that the manipulation of elections started way earlier than that.
That's right, and you're the person who found the proof, the GSA contracts, I think 3 of them.
Me and a bunch of other researchers.
That's what I mean.
We found the actual GSA contracts.
Yes, so she can't get out of it. And without without the government support...
By the way, that was thanks to Judicial Watch, by the way. I want to give them kudos.
The heavy lifters. That's why they got the big muscles. And we do our part, though. We do our part. We get a big leverage. We get a stick so long that we can leverage anything. So as we're leveraging right here Facebook out of existence, as it starts to falter and it starts to fall apart, you need to be paid immediately. The Miller Act notice needs to be paid because why? It was a theft. It was part of the racketeering. So it's nothing more than this is what the government does. Oh, you're guilty? Okay, you stole $200 billion? Okay, we're going to charge you $1 million. Okay, thank you. And it's over.
How about more like 5 to 6 trillion?
That's right. So what we're going to say is
that's the better number.
I like 5 to 10 trillion. And then what was the first payment for the Miller Act notice? It's only in the billions. It's
40 billion.
It's nothing.
40 billion.
That's a day's pay for Zuckerberg. So the deal is, we want to see that go down, and we know that when the CIA contract and the whole separation is taken away from the surveillance, targeting, and manipulation of people on Facebook, that then someone has to pick up the pieces, and we're hoping Leader Technology and other companies step forward and make it right. But that as it falls, it takes with it Apple, and it takes with it Amazon.
By the way, let me inject something that we just learned yesterday from a whistleblower. The network, the global network, basically for how big data is manipulated and observed, there is 100% surety that nothing is secure in the world, in the data world, and that any device, any type of computer, hardware, software, this system, this monopoly has access to that data. No question. There is no encryption that they can't get through. That's what we just were told yesterday.
Well,
I think this is a credible source.
I believe that. Also, we know the Federal Bridge Certification Authority means that certain people have access to everything. So when it comes down to it,
right? That's Hillary Clinton and Rose Law Firm and Michael Chertoff, former head of DHS, and now Robert Mueller with what's the name of that firm he's with?
Cloudflare.
I can't remember. Cloudflare, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Good memory, Douglas.
You know what I think? I think that because Betsy is always listening from a very high editorial position, and she says, to my mind, AT&T/CNN, New York Times /Carlos Slim /Mexico /Open Borders,
Well, AT&T
Jeff Bezos
/
Washington Post. You know,
AT&T, Douglas, has always been the network behind the Five Eyes, always from the beginning.
And IBM is as criminal as anybody can imagine. So
that's the hardware that runs on the network.
Obama
from the beginning.
Netflix. So what's that? That's the leftist, anarchist, demon rat, socialists has their own propaganda group called Netflix. And what are they doing? Again, the Soros agenda. And what is New York Times doing? Again, the Soros Open Borders agenda. Oh, and what is Washington Post doing? What's called cultural Marxism, or chaos Marxism, as I like to call it. That's what they're doing. They're taking over all merchandising and delivery, right? And then what is Apple doing? Oh, they're ruining all of our children's minds. What is that? That is the communist agenda. Now, what is the last of the G? I just went over the FANG. What's the G Google doing about this? Well, first off, they changed their name to Alphabet. But the point is that Schmidt went over, created what's going to happen here in America, in China. That killed 2 million Muslims, put 17 million Chinese basically into a digital prison, so they can't even get on public transportation and many other things because of their credit score through Dragonfly. And you and the researchers and us pointed out that Eric Schmidt was there behind not only Dragonfly, but he was right there with the same group out of Rose Law Firm with, let's just name them because we forgot to name them for a while. I'm going to name a few, then you name a few. James Chandler, James Comey, Robert Mueller. These are all the evil cabal that started stealing patents in Rose Law Firm in Arkansas.
Here's Hillary's partner, Jerry C. Jones.
Oh, big time. And then, of course, Hillary and Bill.
Digistert.
And then the guy who started ICANN, Stephen Crocker, who was in control of it. And then the guy from IBM, what's his name? Capos. And then, who are we missing? This is the same cabal that's committing the crimes right this very minute in Washington, D.C. But anyway, they were doing that. They started the Internet of Things through a person called Richard Walker, and Agilent, a company that just out of the blue became the largest traded company in the world overnight, he started himself magically. Oh, and then he came back and was Hillary's man for Broadcom too. That was really, for Broadcom. That was amazing. He comes out of retirement after inventing the greatest inventions ever, and appears as now the leader of Broadcom as they're trying to take over 5G in America. Almost did it. Anyway, Richard Walker created the Internet of Things. That's the same thing as Dragonfly, folks. It is Clinton communism. It is Russian/Chinese communism. And it's already in place.
Let me add one name to the list that's not normally talked about. His name is Philip J. Venables, and he has been the cryptocurrency king within this cabal ever since the early 90s. The first meetings of the encryption system in 93, all the way to he was advising Obama in the Tech Council in the White House right up until 2016. And so I hate to pop everybody's bubble on Bitcoin and all the rest, but that's never been anything but the pay mechanism for this one system, this one CIA system.
Yes, and
I people want to say rogue CIA, and I suppose you can say rogue, but it seems to me all these intelligence guys knew what was going on, and there's been a lot of people that haven't been talking up till now. Hopefully they'll start talking now.
Oh, absolutely. And we see that Facebook is starting its own crypto coin, which they were going to do from the beginning, you told me.
That's all the same thing, just another brand of the same system. They've been building it since the early 90s.
money going up and down in crypto coin, somebody said the other day, has been basically a loss, a net loss over what everyone's experienced. So no one knows when these things start, and no one knows who started them, or it's started by a magical, mythical person. Nobody knows how
Philip
many
J.
shares started
Venables, not mythical. His very real name.
Exactly.
And by the way, this was confirmed yesterday by an insider. I forgot to tell you that. Just yesterday.
Wow. Well, what we're seeing,
eyewitness insider,
is as you say, our CIA or rogue CIA, it doesn't matter, or corporate intelligence, it doesn't matter. If you haven't taken a military sworn oath to get your top secret security clearance, then you really don't respect it very much, as it should be respected. And we see that that's the evidence. We see that evident in John Brennan or a Clapper or a Comey or any of these people who had these high-level positions and absolutely committed treason. And I hope someday will go to jail, or as someone said, should be hung. In some cases, that I should say that they should be hung. And that's the way that it is. And when you look at mainstream media and what we have brought out, that it's run by Avid and ISIS management, that comes back to 6 groups of people. It literally comes back to 6 people. And, well, you pull those people into a room and say, hey, you know what? Have you ever heard the word racketeering? Because you guys are affecting national security by putting out lies that affect our currency. It affects our economy. It affects everything.
Right.
Same thing for
So
FANG.
what we're seeing in these formation documents for Five Eyes from 45, 46 is we're reading about all spies sitting in a room, agreeing they're not going to tell anybody else what they're talking about. They're organizing the entire surveillance network for the world, which we have today. So there hasn't been a break in this continuity from World War II, and actually it was before that, but they really started getting organized right after World War II. And it's all spies. It's all people who lie for a living. How can that be the right kind of system for a moral civilization? It cannot. So from my civil engineering hat on, this foundation is rotten. It's rotten. And we now see the actual evidence. It's not even a question. And now somebody just recently discovered that on the British side, the director of MI6, who was the chairman of the organizing committee for this U.S.-UK agreement, admitted in 52 when he retired that he had a in today's dollars, about a $50 million slush fund that the Prime Minister and the Parliament didn't even know about, and that money came from an American New Yorker. So all the arrows are pointing to this banker, spy, propaganda cabal that's been organizing and controlling or manipulating our communication.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It goes back to actually a few buildings in New York. It was at the NAA, the National American Alliance, or they had all these lovely titles. But what they did was they started Bolshevism. What they did was they started the Nazis. They gave them and funded them on purpose because we needed more war. And when you say, it all goes back to bankers who need war. And so when we're talking about the Brits, we need to remember they came from German and Dutch and Venetian bankers. Okay? Bankers. And those bankers want one thing, and that's money, and war makes money. So what did the Brits do? After they absorbed the best warrior banker corporation in the world, the British East India Company, and Holland absorbed the Dutch East India Company, and they stopped fighting over America, because that's what the first American Revolution was about. The British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company fighting with each other. Same thing they did throughout the whole world. And Britain, when you say Britain, you cannot forget that Israel is Britain. The Zionists are Britain. They invented it.
Right.
And when you say China, You say Britain. When you say Hong Kong, when you say Singapore, when you say Shanghai, you say Britain. And when you say the United States of America, it's questionable. We may be, if I'm saying there's 54 Commonwealth nations, Israel's 55th, China's 56th, and we are 57th, though. They really thought that they never lost us.
The interesting thing in these 46 documents is the very clever way the British injected all the members of their Commonwealth in the agreement, very, very obliquely, but it's definitely there. So we see there the way in which the British Empire, the whole empire, was incorporated into this agreement with the United States. So when we look at Cecil Rhodes's dream of bringing America back into the Commonwealth, these documents describe how they did it. And these are all, by the way, all these guys that were involved on the British side. About half of the people involved on the British side in these negotiations are still redacted to this day. But even the ones that aren't are almost all of them are knights, and one of them was Order of the British Empire. He wasn't a knight. But yeah, they just carried right on and continued manipulating us for a much deeper agenda, which was British hegemony.
And we
It's really
Americans,
clear.
we're trying to learn British hegemony. I mean, Daddy Bush tried his best. You know that when Daddy Bush was no longer president, he started 3 corporate intelligence groups, which made him a billionaire in 2 years. And he joined, of course, the Carlyle Group, and he started Barrick Gold, or he joined the Barrick Gold Group, which was a fake gold group. But the point is that they literally created the wars that then they benefited from, because that's what you learn when you're at that top level. Because when the Five Eyes was created, it was a secret group that basically said they can tell nobody that they exist. Well, these are the Chatham House rules, okay? You can't talk about what they do. You can't write anything down. You can't say who the members are, but you're going to be invited to the committee by invitation only, just like the Highlands Forum or the Highlands Group. It was invitation only. In other words, these are the warlords of the world calling people together and basically planning the demise and the death of millions for the sake of their own insider trading. And I just want to point out that if the British, like we did some years ago, said no more offshore accounts, and then that stopped the numbered accounts in Switzerland, and it stopped...
By the way, offshore. When you say offshore, you say British Commonwealth.
That's where I'm going with this. I'm about ready to say that in every one of those 54 Commonwealth nations, at least, or on an island next to them, is an offshore banking group, okay? If the Brits simply stopped their offshore, illegal, tax haven, banking insanity, then globalism would stop the next day. It would stop the next day. Globalism is fed by British offshore accounts. So what happened? After it was made public that we, America, allow this, we had to stop some of our offshore accounts, and the Panamanian Papers came, and all these papers came forward showing what offshore accounts were really doing, and the 65% of the wealth of America was leaving America before it was taxed every year. Okay? What did America do? They opened offshore accounts in Montana and in Nevada and Utah for the first time, and Rockefellers and Rothschilds started to move their money to the American offshore accounts inside the domestic borders of America, because they feared that the British offshore accounts were becoming insolvent because the Americans were going to go after the British offshore accounts. So the minute that the IRS does its job, instead of going after Tea Party members and going after conservative groups, and they start going off after George Soros and the other people who pay no taxes through the money they make from the stock market and through their hedge funds, which are in offshore accounts, the minute that they simply do their job at the IRS, offshore accounts would falter, Britain would falter, and Britain would be made to be no longer the master manipulator of 54, and what do I add? I add 3 more. So the 57 Commonwealth nations, including America, Israel, and China, will no longer be what Britain thinks that it is, which is the monarchical ruler of the world. We don't need a monarchy. And Trump is over there showing them, especially with Melania, what grace is about, what intelligence is about, and that war, I mean, what do they always do? They show their war toys when they get together. What does Trump always do? He puts the cards on the table, and he talks economics, and he talks sanctions, and he talks practical reality that affect people's real life, not the chips on the table for the globalists. So I think I'm done preaching, but you know what I think of globalists.
I'm with you.
I like to be a big pain in the ass for globalists. And hello, Brits, stop your offshore accounts, and then we'll do business.
Well, if we go back to this discussion of the breakup, the trust breakup, I think you're right. That doesn't address the problem properly. It's racketeering, and we're not addressing the underlying formation of these organizations in a rogue intelligence, dirty money, In-Q-Tel, CIA-backed ventures that essentially created Silicon Valley and to a large extent actually controls the stocks on Wall Street. So that's the real problem here. So let's not fix it at just putting Band-Aids on it. Let's really fix the problem this time. Let's not go down the AT&T route.
Oh, I totally agree. I think we have to take them down for the criminality that, as you just pointed out, that's the criminality. And the criminality is very clear. They stole from the American people to begin with. They used insider trading. They used venture capital, insider trading knowledge for no-bid government contract. All these things are illegal. Every speck of it.
Right.
They stole your patents. They stole the IP. It's all illegal. It's
well,
about
they
time.
created these fake companies. Then they gave themselves fake contracts, and then they put the stock out on the market and sold people fake stock. And in one sense it's a very big Ponzi scheme. It's very big, and we've got to change that. Let's put our companies back in the hands of real wealth creators instead of these fake guys, all educated by accountants and attorneys who don't know how to work. Sorry to be such a broad brush there, but
well, it's the truth.
It's pretty obvious.
Look at John McAfee. He's insane. Look at Peter Thiel. He says the only model for modern tech companies is what? A monopoly. Look at the insanity of Elon Musk. Look at the complete fakeness of Mark Zuckerberg. Look at the pure evil coming out of the eyes of Eric Schmidt. These are not peaceful. If you believe one word Jack Ma says, you're just an idiot, because he's nothing more than a communist puppet controlled just like Hillary and Bill.
But Douglas, when you're young, you're very impressionable, and you're more easily led. And look what happened. We had all this dirty money, all these spies, all these liars. They went out to Silicon Valley to these 20-somethings, and they said, if you do it this way, we'll give you we'll put you at the head of these companies. And of course, that's what too many of them did. And if you talk to anybody in Silicon Valley right now, you hear this a lot, that the ethic, the morality that's coming out of Silicon Valley is not impressive. And that's because it's ill-gotten gain. They did not achieve their wealth by really working and really creating value. They moved stock around. They manipulated. They lied. They cheated. They got insider no-bid contracts, whatever it was. I mean, back in the telephone days, they were selling telephone minutes to each other. That's how they got in trouble. So Quest would sell telephone minutes to Adelphia, and then Adelphia would turn around and sell telephone minutes to Bell South, and that was a big Ponzi scheme. This is even bigger.
Well, any group that starts to do one thing that they do, first thing they do, The European Union, let's take an example. They want everybody has to join, then everybody has to give up their rights, and then they have really non-elected officials, not elected by the people, and then they have basically a bureaucracy that tells them what to do, and they say, hey, how did we lose our power? Same thing they said to Hitler, same thing they said to Kaiser Wilhelm, same thing they said to even Winston Churchill. I mean, we give our power away so easily to these people at the top, whether it be Edwin Pauli or Alan Dulles or any of these people. For instance, Wild Bill, who started the OSS.
Donovan in 46.
That's
right. That's right at the time we're reading about now. But what we're reading about is the agreement that occurred right before that. So once they got all their deals worked out in London, then they started forming the NSA and the CIA and the GCHQ and MI6 modern version.
Well, as you've and your researchers have found, you found a donation that actually started that nonsense. And of course, the donation was completely slanted in the direction of the corporate dynasties. And it's just disgusting that Wild Bill Donovan found the German and the Japanese gold that was on the Philippines. That's what gave the CIA its foundation. And so Alan Dulles, who literally was responsible for the death of John F. Kennedy, the man John F. Kennedy fired months before he was killed and refused to step down. Alan Dulles refused to step down as the head of the CIA and then planned carefully with 6 different groups to kill John F. Kennedy. Now, this is the power of these people because why? They had all the money that they needed. They had all the gold. They had too much gold. They still have too much gold, and they still use it in for fake assets. As they lease it to people, basically. But they have created literally 2,000 companies have been created out of people who were previously with intelligence groups, specifically the CIA. Because when you know the inside track, they literally have to create companies to shuffle this money into. We just mentioned Richard Walker. What was it that he opened with in his IPO? It was like
$1.5 billion. It was the largest IPO in 1999.
Where did that money come from? Working at HP?
That was HP selling off Agilent.
Yes. And you see, what you get is you start an Alphabet out of Google, but Alphabet opens with a value that's 4 times the value of Google. How does that happen? That is because insider trading, bankers, and the illegal accountants they use.
Well, I heard Lloyd Blankfein, the chairman of CEO of Goldman Sachs, one time. Somebody asked him, "How do you create wealth?" He said, "Well, we're pretty good at creating wealth. We're just not really good at spreading it out."
Peter Thiel is right. Only a monopoly will work in this system, and that's basically. I don't care about monopolies. I don't care about antitrust because those things will go like the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. Everybody's saying, why don't you do something about 5G? That's not even their domain. They simply sell bandwidth, and they try to keep antitrust from happening, and they don't. They do a horrible job, AT&T, CNN, New York Times, Mexico, Bezos. And Bezos with the... Look at Bezos in his early pictures and later pictures when he was a man. They're not the same ears unless they cut his ears off and put on new ears. That's a different person. And he only came out when his girlfriend had put out what was going to cost America $5 trillion for the Paris Climate Accord. One person did that study. One person. His mentor was Professor Gracie Chichilinsky. And in the early 90s, she's an economist, and she was writing papers on carbon credits. And many attribute her as the creator of carbon credits, and that was Bezos's professor from college at Princeton. Exactly.
Who had a CIA relative, I think it was his father or his grandfather.
So the European Union, the Council on Foreign Relations, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, any organization part of the United Nations, all take away the sovereignty of America, just as British sovereignty was taken away by the European Union. Though they were all told, oh, it's all going to be better for everybody. No, it wasn't. It was only better for George Soros, period. And George Soros wasn't getting enough money, so he created an invasion of Europe so that he could attack the European Union's central bank. But because of Brexit, the central bank has never really been as wealthy as it should have been, and they weren't able to force all the countries in that he wanted so that he could, at one time, basically do what he did to the English pound and has done to 14 other countries. Currency manipulation through basically...
Well, looking at the corporations in Europe, the ones that are run by the globalists, like Sir Jeffrey Patty, and Lord Mark Malloch Brown, the companies within their sphere are totally integrated with European companies. So they, for example, they own these very large accounting firms, and those accounting firms are all merged. They're half British, half French, for example, and they're already counting the carbon credits. So they were counting on that accord going through with Obama. And so when you say Britain wasn't in on this, it sure looks to us like the EU was part of Britain's creation as well. It's just that not everybody in England went along with it.
And the Privy
Council going
Council,
along with it.
Well, when you say George Soros, you say Lord Mark Malloch Brown, because he was on the Open Society's original foundation. Okay, these guys are bunk buddies. You can't get any closer than the Privy Council and George Soros and Jeff.
Right. So it looks like the EU is a Privy Council creation.
Exactly.
And if we go back to World War I and we look at the League of Nations, and that all was a British creation. So the story's not simple.
Well, they had to destabilize Soros and the Privy Council and the Brits and the Queen had to destabilize Europe again, because every time it's destabilized, Britain comes out on top and nobody notices their crimes. And they have all the propaganda down. They got the stolen technology. They have all the systems down to win war. When war happens, the machines of war are greasing the British pound. And they know this. So the Privy Council is not on the side of the Brits. No. They're on George Soros' side. They're on the Open Border Society, the Open Society's
That's what it looks
borders.
like from all the relationships that we see.
And they have the propaganda behind it. They have the election rigging behind it. They have the pedophilia streams behind it. They have the offshore accounts behind it. They have all of the old, anywhere money flows, the Brits tax it.
Well, the Rothschild family is just as strong in France as it is in London. And I'm sure they're not getting a divorce.
Oh, no. The Rothschilds are everywhere now. There's so many of them, and you can't name a big deal. I mean, Genie Oil. Oh, Jacob Rothschild. Oh, you can't name a big deal that the Rothschilds are there.
Some are French, some are English.
Yep. Oh, they're all over. They had them in 5 of the major European cities, and they used carrier pigeons as their intelligence system, which kept them ahead of who was going to win what war and who had just won what battle. And that's how these bankers got the intelligence they needed. Later, they bought Reuters. And so Reuters Thompson was, for a while, basically, you might as well say that was Reuters Rothschild. And then AP, the money behind that, behind the companies behind the Associated Press, were Rothschild-inspired companies, and Rothschild money behind them, as well as the Warburgs and the Rothschilds and all those people. So you can see that the Brits always, it doesn't matter whether it's the Knights of Malta, whether it's the Vatican Bank, whether it's China, it doesn't matter. The Brits are already there. They've already thought it through. They're already setting up their toll booths and getting
let me give an example of how clever these guys are in this intelligence sharing agreement. One of the clauses that the British slipped in, was a clause that said they were going to share all information with each other unless the information was gathered through either a U.S. or British patent, in which case they could withhold the information. So that essentially allowed them to withhold all information. But the other thing that it did, and this is really why I think they focused on patents so much, is they set their goal to acquire rights to all or most patents so that essentially this was a completely rogue entity that never really had to share any information outside of its little family of people, which was a very secret group. And so their secrecy agreement, they actually called it the Ultra Oath in their documents. And later we've heard of MK Ultra and all the others. This was all a secrecy agreement that was before the end of the war. They started using this, and they continued it. And what we're seeing here is a completely locked down global surveillance system using the funds of sovereign governments to run a completely rogue intelligence system globally. And that's the group that we're talking about breaking up now with all these brand names like Facebook and YouTube and Twitter and MySpace. It's all the same technology. It's all the same people.
It's the corporate intelligence moved out into our entertainment and our technology. And if we look at the Italians, 6 of their intelligence agencies over the Trump attack have been stepped down or fired. And we know Arvinder Sambai and Alison Saunders and Sir Charles Farr and all of them are all on the run.
He died,
all
didn't he commit suicide?
Yes,
Quote?
He committed suicide. Isn't that a coincidence? And so what we have here is all the Brits are on the run, the Italians are on the run, the Ukrainians are running at us saying, here's all the evidence. The Russians are laughing because they didn't do a thing. They were hoping that Hillary would get elected. They don't understand what the heck happened. Everybody is coming out of the woodwork, and what we're seeing now is it's just a time for us to sit back in the grandstands, get our popcorn and better get a hot dog and better get a lot to drink, because it's just going to be nonstop entertainment till 2020 when Trump wins and the Democratic Party basically implodes, because that's what they're doing. And what we're pointing out here
Well, I'm looking forward to having you and Tyler break it down.
Well, what we're looking at here is very simple. The Five Eyes Agreement should have never been made. It's all to the advantage of the Brits. We need to get out of that. We need to have no agreements with any groups, no group trade agreements, no group intelligence agreements, only bilateral. And when the Brits admit their part of British Gate, Crown Gate, the attack on Trump, then maybe we can do business with them, because they're going to be really hard-pressed if they leave the European Union and Trump says, no, all that spying you did on me, I think we need to deal with that first. They do need to deal with it. That's the reason you've seen so many of the people in England coming out and saying their alibis and all their pathetic little lies of who was informed, who wasn't informed, and the way Theresa May wasn't informed, and the head Sir Charles Farr was informed, and the head of MI6 and MI5 were informed, and blah, 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 all lies.
They're acting like they were doing us a service.
Exactly.
Hardly.
They actually say that they sent over a letter to the Trump team, and now they have 2 people literally coming forward saying, I personally hand-delivered it to Michael Flynn's team, and he swore he'd get it into Trump's hand. And Michael Flynn saying, no.
I've heard people say that on Fox, and what a joke, because the Fox people don't even follow up on the question and don't even challenge that notion, when in fact it's 180 degrees from that.
They need to say, Alison Saunders, Dinner with the Orrs, Arvinder Sambai, 911, 9/11 with Robert Mueller, same cover-up group, exculpatory evidence, let's look at the 500 people that Robert Mueller really interrogated, and where and when. He interrogated the only real Russian who was a real person, supposedly, and that was Joseph Musset. And, oh, by the way, he's not a Russian, and he's disappeared.
Well, and, they name WikiLeaks as one of the bad actors, but they didn't even bother trying to interview Julian Assange. I mean, what's that?
It's just a cover-up. And so what we see is that all of these agencies that have arisen out of U.S., we the people's money, weaponized, given to these fake people, turned into corporate intelligence, spied on all of us, now needs to be turned back over. Without all of that, without the back doors, and without all the surveillance and the targeting and the behavioral manipulation and the subliminal programming, needs to be given back to the people it was stolen from. You need to be given your recompense, and we need to move forward without having any federal connection to these corporate intelligence groups parading as social media, because that
Right.
is just pure evil, and it's nothing more than the secret deal, the ultra secret deal of the Five Eyes that says we can't let anybody know we exist.